I'll never forget the moment I realized my life had been erased. 3 weeks before my wedding, I walked into my fiancé's family home and found another woman wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only inheritance I had left from her. My name had been crossed off the invitations I'd handwritten, replaced in red ink with hers. And as if that weren't enough, the man I loved stood calmly by, telling me my apartment, my future, even my place at the hospital had already been reassigned. My name is Eugenia Whitaker, and that was the day I was told I no longer belonged anywhere. I carried the seating chart folder like it was my last lifeline as I stepped into the white stone house on Beacon Hill. The Hale family's fortress of power and reputation, the carved doorframe, and the echo of my heels on the marble floor should have felt like the gateway to my future. Instead, the air was sharp with something I couldn't yet name. When the door swung open, it wasn't Eleanor Hale's polished smile that greeted me. It was Veronica, David's sister, draped in an ivory silk dress that clung like a bridal rehearsal gown. My eyes were drawn, unwilling and horrified, to her throat. Hanging there was my grandmother's pearl necklace, the single treasure cancer hadn't stolen from her, the one I'd worn on anniversaries and birthdays, the one that had mysteriously gone missing just weeks ago. I froze where I stood, a silence heavier than any scream. Inside, the living room bore the scars of a takeover. The coffee table was scattered with my wedding invitations, each card I'd written by hand, each name carefully inked. Across every one of them, a red slash, and above my name, bold in the same red, Veronica Hale. My handwriting replaced, my identity erased. She tilted her head with the ease of someone rehearsed for cruelty. David thought it would be easier if I explained. Her smile was sharp, practiced, like she'd been waiting for this performance. From the wingback chair by the fire, Eleanor Hale didn't rise, didn't even pause in her sip of tea. Her pearls clinked against fine china, her gaze as steady as the family crest above the mantel. "The ring," she said flatly, her voice cool as polished silver. "It must stay in the family. Take it off." My hand instinctively curled over the heirloom diamond, the symbol I'd worn for 18 months, as though my grip could keep the life it represented intact. But the room had already been decided against me. A tribunal gathered to watch me stripped of more than a piece of jewelry. And then came the sound of measured footsteps on the staircase. David descended in the Tom Ford suit I'd gifted him for his promotion, carrying a manila folder like a doctor about to deliver bad news. His expression was clinical, detached, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. "Everything has been arranged," he said, placing the folder beside my defaced invitations. "The apartment lease transfers to me next week. Your contracts have been voided. The hospital has already reassigned your position." He spoke each sentence like a diagnosis without cure. 3 weeks before my wedding, I was no longer a bride-to-be. I was an afterthought, crossed out in red ink, and left standing in a house that had decided I did not belong. Back at the apartment, the first thing I saw were the cardboard boxes lined up like silent witnesses. Each one carried a neat label in Eleanor's precise handwriting. Eugenia, miscellaneous. It was as if my entire life had been reduced to odds and ends, something to be packed away and forgotten. The damage was total. My lease had been canceled, my bank account frozen, the deposits for the venue and catering long gone with no refunds. What I had left wouldn't even cover 2 months of rent, just a few $1,000s, and a mountain of credit card debt from bridesmaids' gifts and travel plans for a honeymoon that would never happen. I dialed the only number that felt safe. Nancy answered on the second ring, her voice warm even at the late hour. When she opened the door, she was wearing her old cardigan, the one I remembered from high school, and on the kitchen table sat the chipped porcelain mug she'd always kept aside for me since I was 13. She smiled and said simply, "You'll always have a place here." Her home was small, worn, the kind of space where every object carried a story, and its warmth only made the Hale house feel colder in my memory. Sitting across from her in the yellow glow of the kitchen lamp, I wrapped my hands around that cracked mug and let the steam curl into my face like comfort. Later, over tea, Nancy slid a manila folder across the table. A friend of mine called. They've been looking for someone. It's unusual, but the pay is 3 times what you'd make at the hospital. Inside was the profile of Nathaniel Blackwood, the reclusive tech billionaire who'd been paralyzed after a skiing accident. He needed a private nurse. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. 6 months in that position could wipe out my debt and give me a chance to start over. It sounded dangerous, maybe impossible, but with everything I'd lost, it was the only door still open. The Blackwood estate in Maine rose out of the pines like a fortress, all sharp glass walls and endless corridors that swallowed sound. The iron gates closed behind me with a finality that felt like a lock turning. When I first saw Nathaniel, he was seated in a sleek black wheelchair, his face shadowed by the light pouring in from floor-to-ceiling windows. His eyes were hard and cutting, the kind that measured people before they spoke. "You're the 5th nurse in 2 months," he said coldly. "Don't fool yourself. You'll leave like the rest." I steadied myself and met his gaze. "I'm used to being underestimated, but I know what I'm doing." That night, restless in my assigned suite, I heard the rhythmic clank of metal echoing down the hall. Following the sound, I pushed open the door to a private gym. My breath caught. There he was, gripping the parallel bars, sweat soaking his shirt, his legs trembling as he forced them to move, step by agonizing step. The man who was supposed to be paralyzed was standing, fighting gravity itself. His head snapped up when he realized I was there. His gray eyes blazed with fury. "Get out!" he snarled, his voice raw. "If you breathe a word of this, you'll vanish like the others." I closed the door behind me, my pulse pounding. In that instant, I knew I wasn't the only one hiding wounds. Nathaniel Blackwood carried his own secret, a strength the world was never meant to see. I woke to the hush of the Blackwood estate, the kind of silence that usually soothed me. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe the past had loosened its grip, but Margaret's knock shattered that fragile peace. She leaned in with her usual calmness, though her words carried weight. "Guests today, from the Hale Group?" My pulse hammered as I slipped down the corridor and pressed myself against the frame of the Grand Salon door. The first figure inside was Marcus Hale, sharp suit, sharper gaze, exuding the kind of authority that filled a room before he even spoke. Behind him glided Veronica in a pale cream dress, every step calculated, every detail polished to bridal perfection. And then, David. He looked different, yet achingly familiar. His Armani suit tailored, his hair styled as if nothing in his world had fractured. "I'm Dr. David Hale," he announced smoothly. "Consultant physician for the Hale Group. I've reviewed Nathaniel Blackwood's medical file extensively." His voice was the same one that once whispered promises in the dark, now stripped of warmth. I felt my body tense as his words cut across the room. "Permanent paralysis, no possibility of recovery. For the sake of stability, Mr. Blackwood should relinquish control of the company." His verdict fell like a gavel. Veronica leaned back in her chair, her hand toying with a strand of pearls at her neck, the very pearls stolen from my grandmother's jewelry box. Her smirk was a dagger, silent but sharp. "You lost, and I won." Nathaniel, seated across from them, lowered his eyes, his voice frail. "I understand." To anyone else, he looked defeated. But when his gaze flicked briefly toward me, I caught it, an icy spark, a silent signal. He was playing a role. I pressed closer into the shadows, my chest tight. David, the man who once vowed to build a future with me, now orchestrated lies to strip another man of his legacy. And in that instant, I realized I wasn't just the victim of betrayal. I had become a witness to a larger war. After the meeting, I found Nathaniel in the training room. He sat in his chair, motionless, his hands gripping the wheels but not moving. I blurted out, "Why didn't you tell them the truth?" His jaw tightened. "Because if they believe I'm helpless, they'll expose themselves. I need them to get comfortable. And you," his eyes burned into mine, You just came face to face with the man who destroyed both of us. Later, rifling through documents in the study, I stumbled on a printed email exchange. David's name at the top, Veronica's beneath, and one line that knocked the breath out of me. Remove her, she's a liability. My knees went weak. I could almost hear his voice again, whispering on the night he proposed. I'll take care of you for the rest of our lives. Now those same words twisted into a cruel joke. Nathaniel wheeled over to the safe, entered a code, and pulled out a recorder. With a click, Marcus Hale's voice spilled into the room. Blackwood is too weak, too easy to erase from the board. The disdain was unmistakable. Nathaniel's gaze didn't waver as he switched it off. Eugenia! If you want revenge, stand with me. You'll get to see him kneel. For a moment I couldn't breathe, but then I reached across the cold steel of the parallel bars, wrapping my hand around his. In that grip, something shifted. We were no longer castaways of separate betrayals. We were bound together, an alliance born out of the wreckage, forged by the fire of what we'd both lost. The morning light spilled across the polished floor of the training room as I steadied Nathaniel's shoulder. He leaned heavily on the cane, sweat dripping onto the wood with every step. 1, 2, then 10. Each movement carved a mark of defiance into the silence. My palm pressed against his back, feeling not just his heartbeat, but my own racing to match it. When his body faltered, I caught him instinctively. For a breathless second, his weight rested fully on me, and his eyes locked with mine. What should have been routine care felt like something more. Unspoken, dangerous, undeniable. Later that day, rifling through a stack of papers in Marcus Hale's office while delivering correspondence, my eyes caught on one line, bold and merciless. Marriage alliance ensures takeover. My chest tightened. Their strategy wasn't subtle. David and Veronica's union was the lever to pry Blackwood Industries from its rightful heir. As if to crown the insult, gossip columns soon lit up with Veronica's staged smile and carefully chosen words. She was expecting. I knew it for what it was. Fabrication. Another calculated move to solidify her family's grip. That night, Nathaniel slammed the file shut, his knuckles white around the folder. They haven't just stolen from me, he said, voice low, dangerous. His gaze cut through me. They're building their empire on your betrayal. The banquet hall glittered with crystal chandeliers. But I walked in unnoticed, the black and white uniform of a server disguising me better than any mask. The tray of wine glasses trembled slightly in my hands as I moved among the tables, ears straining for every word. My skin prickled when Marcus Hale's commanding baritone carried across the table. Blackwood is finished. By the end of the quarter, he'll be out of the CEO chair for good. The casual certainty in his voice made bile rise in my throat. As I set a glass before one of the lawyers, I felt David's gaze sweep the room. For a terrifying second, his eyes landed on me. My breath snagged. I kept my head bowed, my voice silent, praying the disguise would hold. Somehow, it did. Back at the estate, Nathaniel was already 2 steps ahead. While I risked exposure, he had hacked into Hale Group's servers, pulling files that painted the truth in numbers. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, transactions that reeked of laundering, proof of rot beneath the polish. When the evening ended and I slipped out through the staff entrance, the last thing I heard was Veronica's laugh, bright and cruel. Even if Eugenia came back, no one would believe her. I've turned her into a ghost. Her words didn't hollow me. They lit a fire. I walked into the night with a vow burning in my chest. I would return, not as a ghost haunting the edges of their empire, but in the full light they thought I'd never claim again. The city was buzzing with early traffic as the black sedan pulled up to the gleaming tower of Blackwood Industries. I stepped out first, clutching the thick folder of evidence against my chest so tightly my knuckles blanched. Beside me, Nathaniel unfolded himself from the car, the Tom Ford suit cutting a sharp line across his tall frame. In his right hand, he gripped the ebony cane tipped with polished silver. For months he'd hidden behind walls and shadows. Today, he walked into the light. The lobby fell silent. The receptionist's mouth parted in disbelief as Nathaniel moved past her desk. The sound of his cane striking marble, sharp, deliberate, unyielding, echoed off the vaulted ceiling. With each step, it was as if the building itself was reminded who it belonged to. Upstairs, the boardroom waited like a stage set for war. Marcus Hale sat in the chairman's seat, chin raised, every inch the conqueror in waiting. Veronica, poised beside him, looked every bit the queen he thought she was grooming. Across the table, David shuffled through a folder thick with falsified medical records, his confidence wrapped around every page. My pulse hammered as I walked to the head of the table and laid down the folder I carried. Printouts of emails marked confidential, voice recordings etched onto discs, ledgers showing wire transfers to Cayman accounts. The weight of it slammed against the mahogany table like a gavel. Nathaniel leaned forward, his eyes locked on David. "According to your report," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the stunned boardroom. "I shouldn't be able to do this." He pressed his cane into the floor and straightened, then let go. His legs trembled, but he stood, step by step. He circled the table, the sound of his shoes against the wood as shocking as a gunshot. A gasp rippled through the room. David's face drained of color, the papers in his hand rattling. Marcus's jaw clenched, and Veronica's polished smile faltered for the first time. I moved closer, my eyes never leaving David's. "You taught me what it felt like to be abandoned," I said, my voice steady though my chest was burning. "Today, I'm teaching you what it feels like to be replaced." A sharp breath broke the silence. Veronica's hand flew to her throat, clutching at the string of pearls glinting under the fluorescent lights, pearls that weren't hers, pearls that belonged to my grandmother. In that moment, the jewelry became a beacon, the embodiment of every betrayal they thought would remain hidden. And as every eye in the room followed the shimmer of those pearls, the truth stood naked between us all. The boardroom air hung thick, as though the walls themselves were bracing for the blow. Marcus Hale leaned forward, his voice sharp, calculated. "All of this is fabrication," he declared, his tone meant to steady the room. Nathaniel didn't flinch. With a calm hand, he pressed play on a recorder. Marcus's own voice filled the chamber. "The crippled genius is ripe for harvesting." The words landed like a sentence, impossible to walk back. Patricia Coleman, Nathaniel's attorney, rose from her chair, her presence commanding. One by one, she listed the charges: medical fraud, money laundering, HIPAA violations, conspiracy to steal intellectual property. Each accusation struck like a hammer, leaving the Hales no room to breathe. Across the table, David's bravado cracked. I couldn't help but remember the day Eleanor demanded I return my engagement ring. Now it was David, hands trembling, forced to unscrew the cap of his Mont Blanc pen to sign papers relinquishing every claim. He looked up, eyes wet, voice quivering. "Eugenia, I'm sorry." I met his gaze without blinking. "You lost me a long time ago. Today, you lose everything else." The vote was unanimous. Control of Blackwood Industries was restored to Nathaniel. Marcus Hale's hand shook as he scrawled his reluctant signature, while Veronica's smile collapsed under mascara-streaked tears, her pearls no longer gleaming but choking her throat. The empire they built on betrayal was crumbling in plain sight. 6 months later, the lawn of the Whitaker Blackwood Rehabilitation Center shimmered with banners and sunlight. The crowd gathered for its grand opening. I stood beside Nathaniel, who now walked with only a faint limp, his presence commanding, dignified. In the front row sat Aunt Nancy, her hands wrapped around the same chipped porcelain mug she'd kept for me since I was 13. My throat tightened at the sight. It was proof that love, real love, never abandons. Through months of quiet investigation, I had recovered my grandmother's pearls. Instead of wearing them, I placed them in a glass case inside my office, not as jewelry, but as a relic, a chapter closed. The tabloids buzzed with rumors. David and Veronica had rushed into a small, joyless wedding, attended by almost no one. Lawsuits mounted against the Hale Group, their assets frozen, their empire dismantled piece by piece. Nathaniel pressed a cool key into my palm. "From now on, this legacy is ours," he whispered. And I knew he was right. When David left me, I thought it was the end, but it was only the first page of a new life, one where I was chosen, never replaced.